The 1950s gave us Marilyn Monroe and Marlon Brando and movies everyone still quotes. But what about the brilliant films that flopped so badly they nearly destroyed careers? One picture on this list was so ahead of its time that audiences walked out in disgust, only for modern critics to call it prophetic genius. Ready to discover what Hollywood buried? Number 10. The Narrow Margin, 1952. A detective escorts a mob widow on a train while hitmen hunt them through every car, and director Richard Fleischer turned $70,000 into the tightest thriller the decade produced. This film proves budget limitations can birth innovation rather than mediocrity. Charles McGraw brings granite toughness to Detective Walter Brown, a man whose moral code gets tested every moment of the journey. His weathered face and clipped delivery create a protagonist who feels genuinely dangerous rather than conventionally heroic. Marie Windsor plays the widow with acidic wit that cuts through every scene she occupies. The train setting transforms claustrophobia into narrative engine. Every corridor becomes a potential ambush. Every compartment hides possible death. Fleischer's camera prowls through tight spaces, making viewers feel the walls closing in alongside characters who cannot escape their moving prison. RKO barely released it, dumping the film as a B-picture afterthought. Critics who noticed praised its economy and tension. Audiences who found it became devoted evangelists, spreading word about this hidden gem through decades of obscurity. The running time barely exceeds 70 minutes. Every frame serves the story. No padding exists. Modern thrillers regularly exceed 2 hours while delivering less tension than Fleischer achieved before his first act concluded. Martin Scorsese has championed its restoration and preservation. The Criterion Collection eventually recognized its significance. The Narrow Margin demonstrates that great cinema requires vision and craft, not money and spectacle. Its influence on subsequent train thrillers is undeniable, even when filmmakers don't realize what they're borrowing from. Number 9. The Hitch-Hiker, 1953. Two friends on a fishing trip pick up a stranger who turns out to be a wanted killer, and suddenly they're hostages driving toward Mexico with death-riding shotgun. Ida Lupino directed this brutal survival thriller, becoming the only woman to helm a classic film noir during Hollywood's golden age. Lupino understood fear better than her male contemporaries. Her camera lingers on small details that amplify terror. The killer's drooping eyelid that never fully closes, meaning he appears awake even while sleeping. The vast desert landscapes offering no escape. The psychological torture of uncertainty about whether each moment is your last. William Tallman plays Emmett Myers with reptilian menace. His performance avoids theatrical villainy for something far more disturbing. Casual cruelty delivered without emotion. Violence as simple problem-solving. Myers feels like someone you might actually encounter, which makes him infinitely more frightening than monsters ever could. The film was based on real events, the Billy Cook murders that terrorized the Southwest. Lupino stripped the story to its essential horror without sensationalizing the tragedy that inspired it. Critics praised its technical excellence, while largely ignoring Lupino's groundbreaking position behind the camera. Her achievement received proper recognition only decades later when film scholars examined how gender shaped Hollywood opportunities. The Film Noir Foundation restored it to pristine condition. Modern audiences discovered what 1953 audiences missed. Lupino's direction feels contemporary in its restraint and psychological sophistication. The Hitchhiker proves that great directors existed in every era, even when the industry refused to acknowledge their presence. Number 8. Pickup on South Street, 1953. A pickpocket accidentally steals microfilm being passed to communist spies, and suddenly every intelligence agency in the Cold War wants him dead or cooperative. Director Samuel Fuller made the grittiest, most cynical spy thriller of the era, and J. Edgar Hoover personally hated every frame. Richard Widmark plays Skip McCoy with magnificent sleaze. He's not a hero. He's not even an anti-hero. He's a criminal whose patriotism consists entirely of hating communists slightly more than he hates everyone else. Widmark makes this repulsive character somehow compelling, a survivor in a world that offers no good options. Thelma Ritter earned an Oscar nomination for her supporting role as Mo, an informant selling information to survive. Her final scene remains one of the decade's most heartbreaking moments. Ordinary people crushed between ideological forces that see them as expendable resources. The FBI demanded changes that Fuller refused. Hoover wanted clear moral lines between American heroes and communist villains. Fuller delivered moral ambiguity that suggested Cold War politics corrupted everyone they touched. The battle between artist and authority shaped the final product without destroying it. French critics at Cahiers du Cinéma championed Fuller as an authentic American auteur. Their enthusiasm eventually influenced American reassessment of his entire catalog. What Hollywood dismissed as B-movie violence, European intellectuals recognized as revolutionary cinema. The opening sequence where Skip picks the microfilm remains technically dazzling. Fuller choreographed the theft with precision that later crime filmmakers studied obsessively. Tarantino calls Fuller essential viewing for anyone serious about understanding American genre cinema. Number 7. In A Lonely Place, 1950. Humphrey Bogart plays a Hollywood screenwriter suspected of murder, and his relationship with a neighbor who provides his alibi becomes increasingly dangerous as his violent temper reveals itself. Director Nicholas Ray made the darkest examination of toxic masculinity that 1950s Hollywood would allow. Bogart deliberately subverted his romantic leading man image. Dixon Steele isn't charming. He's volatile, controlling, and potentially capable of killing when rage overtakes him. Gloria Graham, Ray's actual wife at the time, plays the neighbor whose attraction to Dixon curdles into fear as she witnesses his psychological deterioration. The real marriage was collapsing during production. That authentic tension bleeds through every scene between them. You're watching actual relationship destruction performed as fiction, creating discomfort that scripted drama rarely achieves. The screenplay never definitively reveals whether Dixon committed the murder that launches the plot. That ambiguity forces viewers to examine their own relationship with the character. Can you root for someone you suspect might be guilty? The film refuses easy answers. Critics initially dismissed it as standard noir fare. Decades of reassessment revealed its sophistication. The exploration of how creativity and destruction intertwine in artistic personalities anticipates psychological complexity that wouldn't become mainstream for another generation. The final line devastates because it acknowledges what conventional Hollywood would deny. Some relationships cannot survive truth. Some people cannot change, despite wanting to. Ray understood darkness that happy endings typically obscure. In A Lonely Place rewards viewers who can handle cinema that refuses comfortable resolution. Number 6. Rififi, 1955. 5 criminals plan and execute a jewelry heist in Paris, and director Jules Dassin created the template that every subsequent heist film would follow. The 30-minute burglary sequence contains 0 dialogue and 0 music, just pure technical precision that leaves audiences holding their breath. Dassin was an American blacklisted during the McCarthy era, forced to work in Europe because Hollywood labeled him a communist sympathizer. His exile produced this masterpiece that American studios couldn't have made under production code restrictions anyway. The silence during the heist wasn't artistic pretension. Dassin understood that every sound the criminals make risks detection. By eliminating score and dialogue, he forces viewers into the same paranoid alertness the characters experience. A dropped tool or accidental scrape could mean prison or death. Jean Servais plays Tony, the aging criminal emerging from prison for one last job. His weathered face tells stories dialogue couldn't convey. French audiences embraced him as an existential hero, a man aware that his choices lead nowhere good but unable to choose differently. The film won Best Director at Cannes, validating Dassin's exile work as artistically superior to anything he'd made in Hollywood. American critics eventually acknowledged what European audiences immediately recognized. Christopher Nolan studied the heist sequence before making his own crime films. Michael Mann acknowledges its influence. The Ocean's franchise wouldn't exist without the template Rififi established. Every heist film featuring meticulous planning and execution owes debts to this blacklisted American working in Paris because his own country rejected him. Number 5. The Wages of Fear, 1953. 4 desperate men drive trucks loaded with volatile nitroglycerin across 300 miles of treacherous South American terrain, and any bump or jolt means instant obliteration. Director Henri-Georges Clouzot created sustained tension that modern filmmakers with unlimited budgets still cannot replicate. Yves Montand plays Mario, a French expatriate stranded in a dead-end village who sees the suicidal transport mission as his only escape. The film spends nearly an hour establishing characters before the trucks begin rolling, investment that transforms the subsequent journey into genuine psychological torment. The practical effects required actual dangerous driving through actual difficult terrain. Actors experience genuine fear that registers on screen. Modern CGI removes the physical stakes that Clouseau's production demanded. You cannot digitally recreate what only real danger produces. American distributors initially released severely cut versions, removing political content criticizing oil company exploitation of third-world labor. The full restoration reveals a film with far more on its mind than simple thriller mechanics. Clouseau was making statements about capitalism and desperation that 1953 America wasn't prepared to hear. The sequence where trucks must navigate a rotting wooden platform suspended over a cliff remains unwatchable for some viewers. The tension is almost physically painful. Clouseau understood that anticipation of disaster tortures more effectively than disaster itself. William Friedkin remade it as Sorcerer in 1977, and even his considerable talents couldn't match the original's impact. The Wages of Fear exists as a benchmark that humbles subsequent attempts. Some films are so perfectly executed that imitation only emphasizes the original's superiority. Number 4. Kiss Me Deadly, 1955. Private detective Mike Hammer picks up a mysterious hitchhiker and stumbles into a conspiracy involving something so dangerous it could destroy civilization itself. Director Robert Aldrich transformed Pulp Fiction into apocalyptic nightmare, creating perhaps the most nihilistic film noir ever made. Ralph Meeker plays Hammer as a brutal thug rather than a romantic detective. He's contemptuous of everyone, violent without provocation, motivated entirely by greed and curiosity. The production code required criminals to be punished, but Aldrich made his protagonist more reprehensible than the villains he pursues. The mysterious box that everyone seeks contains something never explicitly named. The glowing contents that kill anyone who opens it fully anticipated nuclear anxiety in ways that made the film feel prophetic rather than exploitative. Some scholars argue Aldrich created cinema's first glimpse of atomic apocalypse presented as inevitable consequence of human corruption. The original ending showed complete devastation. Studios demanded changes suggesting survival. Different prints circulated for decades with varying conclusions. The restoration that includes destruction validated what Aldrich intended before interference softened his vision. French New Wave directors worshipped it. Godard and Truffaut studied its visual techniques obsessively. American critics dismissed it as trashy violence, while European intellectuals analyzed its revolutionary structure. The disconnect revealed more about critical limitations than artistic achievement. The film opens with a desperate woman running on a highway, breathing heavily, completely vulnerable. That image influenced everything from Twin Peaks to thriller conventions that became standard. Kiss Me Deadly arrived too early for audiences to recognize what they were seeing. Time proved its importance beyond reasonable dispute. Number 3. Sweet Smell of Success, 1957. A powerful newspaper columnist and the press agent who feeds him victims destroy lives across Manhattan while exchanging dialogue so sharp it draws blood. Director Alexander McKendrick made the definitive portrait of media corruption, and audiences hated it so intensely that it nearly bankrupted everyone involved. Burt Lancaster plays J.J. Hunsaker with terrifying stillness. His columnist character wields power through implications and access, destroying careers with carefully placed items while maintaining deniability. Lancaster understood that real power doesn't need to shout. It simply exists, and everyone adjusts accordingly. Tony Curtis delivered the performance of his career as Sidney Falco, a desperate hustler willing to destroy anyone for access to Hunsaker's influence. Curtis fought studio executives who wanted him to remain a pretty face. This role proved he could act, even if audiences punished him for showing them something ugly. The dialogue by Clifford Odets and Ernest Lehman crackles with malicious wit. Lines like, "I'd hate to take a bite out of you, you're a cookie full of arsenic," became legendary among screenwriters studying the craft. Every exchange advances character while delivering memorable phrases that stick in memory for decades. Audiences in 1957 wanted escapist entertainment. They received a mirror reflecting American media's capacity for cruelty. Box office failure was swift and devastating. Critics who praised it couldn't save it from public rejection. The film's reputation grew steadily as subsequent decades revealed how accurately it predicted celebrity journalism's worst impulses. What seemed exaggerated in 1957 looks understated now. McKendrick saw the future, and audiences weren't ready to believe him. Number 2, The Night of the Hunter, 1955. A murderous preacher with love and hate tattooed on his knuckles hunts two children across Depression-era America to find stolen money their executed father hid. Charles Laughton's only directorial effort created imagery so distinctive that 70 years later, nothing else looks quite like it. Robert Mitchum plays Reverend Harry Powell with seductive menace that defines screen villainy. His love and hate speech became iconic, referenced and parodied endlessly while never losing its original power. Mitchum understood how charm enables monstrousness, how authority figures exploit trust. Laughton drew from German expressionism and silent film techniques that 1955 audiences found alienating. The stylized imagery, the fairy tale atmosphere, the deliberate artificiality all confused viewers expecting conventional thriller mechanics. They rejected what they didn't understand. Lillian Gish appears as a protective figure sheltering endangered children, her silent film legacy lending mythic weight to a character representing goodness against Powell's evil. Laughton deliberately cast her to create symbolic resonance beyond simple narrative function. The box office failure devastated Laughton. He never directed again despite obvious mastery of the medium. Hollywood punished vision that exceeded audience expectations, a pattern repeated throughout cinema history. Critics initially dismissed it as pretentious and strange. Decades of reassessment transformed it into acknowledged masterpiece. The Criterion Collection, the National Film Registry, and every serious film institution now celebrates what contemporary audiences rejected. Spike Lee shows it to students as essential viewing. Guillermo del Toro cites it constantly. Martin Scorsese considers it among the greatest films ever made. Laughton's singular achievement grew more influential dead than it ever was alive. Some art requires time to find its audience. Number 1, Ace in the Hole, 1951. A cynical journalist traps a man in a collapsed mine to extend the rescue story and revive his failed career, and director Billy Wilder made the most savage media satire in cinema history. Audiences in 1951 walked out disgusted. Critics in 2024 call it the most relevant film ever made about American journalism. Kirk Douglas delivers volcanic intensity as Chuck Tatum, a reporter so corrupt he'll literally let a man die slowly to maximize headlines. Douglas understood that great villainy requires charisma. Tatum is despicable and magnetic simultaneously, a combination that forces viewers into uncomfortable complicity. Wilder based the story on actual events, the Floyd Collins cave entrapment that became a media circus in 1925. He updated the exploitation for television-age sensibilities, anticipating how cameras would transform tragedy into entertainment in ways that hadn't fully emerged yet. Paramount released it under multiple titles, desperately searching for audiences who kept staying away. The studio lost substantial money. Wilder's career survived because his previous successes bought him protection that lesser talents wouldn't have received. The carnival atmosphere surrounding the trapped man feels almost documentary now. Media circuses around tragedies have become so normalized that Wilder's exaggerations read as understatement. He predicted our present with uncomfortable accuracy. The film disappeared for decades, unavailable for proper viewing until restoration efforts brought it back. Modern critics immediately recognized its prophetic brilliance. Roger Ebert added it to his great movies collection. The American Film Institute reassessed its importance. Billy Wilder considered it his finest work. Hollywood considered it his worst failure. Time sided with Wilder. Ace in the Hole proves that commercial rejection means nothing when artistic vision proves accurate. Some films have to wait for the culture to catch up with what the artist already understood. The 1950s created masterpieces that audiences weren't ready to receive. Commercial failure meant nothing except that vision arrived before acceptance. Which of these forgotten films surprised you most? Which underrated classic deserves modern rediscovery? Drop your picks in the comments below. And here's the question worth fighting about. Were these films ahead of their time, or were 1950s audiences actually right to reject darkness they didn't want to see? Maybe comfort was a reasonable choice, and we're the damaged ones for calling bleakness brilliant.